a big sales pitch on who we are, but just so you know, we cover 2 different sectors. We've been operating since 2017. We were acquired in November 2024, which means we are now able to also serve the social housing market. So we're also looking at energy, fuel poverty, how we can get tenants onto the right tariffs and damper mould. But in commercial spaces, which is where we've spent 8 years of our lives, we help clients to solve complex challenges, we help them to innovate, and we are solution-led. So when we approach a client or a project, we treat you independently. We treat you as completely different. It's not a one-fits-all type solution that we offer. So we are definitely looking at what data you already have. So what BMS systems do you have? What information do you already collect? What half-hourly data do you collect? What data can you get out of the BMS for things like your occupancy or your temperature data? We look at what infrastructure might be needed. Something for a leisure centre is different to what might be needed for a 5-storey building, that might be different for a small office block, that might be different to a heritage site. So our infrastructure adapts depending on client needs. And it is that ability to put one gateway on top of a 5-storey building and all of your sensor data communicates. We look at what sensors you might not already have, and then we build on top of that, and we're looking at energy, environment and occupancy, and I'll go through why that's so important. We look at data privacy. So although a lot of our data that we collect isn't GDPR compliant, we treat it as such. At some point, the regulation will change, and we believe that you should be ahead of that, and you should treat that data confidentially and in sort of a GDPR fashion. We do the installation, we look at a full service offering, and I'm going to go through that in more detail, but everything from making sure you're on the right tariffs when a bill comes in, checking that against sub-metering data, challenging that back with providers, and then sending that through to finance if it's approved. And then we do dashboarding and insights. So we have a core offering for dashboards, but we tailor that for each client to make sure that the reporting and the visualization that you get on the screen is exactly what you need for reporting purposes, as opposed to just another line graph. We do have a big war on line graphs at our organisation. So context, and it's already been set through the Slido, so I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, and I know you know this. So rising energy costs impact your operational spend. Limited funding is a big challenge, but you've still got net zero expectations. You've got ageing buildings, ageing estates, you've got different systems, and estates teams often have limited time to interrogate data. So one of the biggest challenges that we see across commercial and domestic is that technology is often deployed in isolation. So systems might be installed by building, by department, by funding stream, by efficiency measure. I got told there's a cloud system now for fire alarms. There's a cloud system for almost everything. So now you've got 20 dashboards to review and try to understand, did that intervention, are we reducing energy? And you've got to go through so many different dashboards to do that, unless you're using something like Power BI or another system. Data is often held in silos, which with limited integration. Somebody mentioned it before, but inconsistent formats of data. So that also creates limited visibility across the state if we're talking in different ways. And then also things like regulation changes to things like heat networks. So I know that the team here do go into more detail on heat networks. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but it's just to say, what is the business case around energy metering? Well, the biggest one at the moment is the shift from the Office for Product Safety and Standards to Ofgem. So commercial landlords now, and I've got lots of clients in this situation, who will be treated in the same fashion as a utility supplier because the regulation's changing. So a communal heat network, I'm sure most of you know, but is that single central heat source on a building that is feeding multiple customers, where a district heat network is a heat source feeding multiple buildings. Both of those are still going to be up for making sure that their data is transparent, metering is accurate, you're billing tenants fairly, and you're protecting consumers. So even legacy and existing arrangements will now be under scrutiny, and that will come with more compliance and enforcement. So there is a need for landlords and local authorities, public sector, commercial clients, if they are have got that sort of shared heat network, to make sure that you've got the right sub-metering and energy data in place. So a lot of the issues that we see in buildings, data, as mentioned, it exists, but it's often not used. There's lack of visibility. Set points is a big one. Somebody mentioned that before about being able to change that on a BMS and temperature and humidity data. Systems running outside of hours, and poor alignment with occupancy, which is a big one I'm going to touch on, and inability to evidence the impact of an intervention. So I've picked solar as an example, but this could be voltage optimization, it could be an air source, it could be a new energy efficient hand dryer that you're installing. But when you actually install an intervention that on a brochure says it will save you 30%, how do you know that that actually happened? Unless you're looking at your half hourly data. If you've got a really good system, that's fantastic. But a lot of our clients don't have that initial baseline to then compare the after. So what actually happened post installation to my building demand. So I've got an example of this. So this is a local authority. I'm not naming them, the top one, but they're a local authority local to myself. And they have solar on the roof. We were looking at a smart building project for them. So we were looking at matching occupancy to energy. So making sure the building was aligned to how it was used. And I asked about solar. And they didn't know who had the password. They didn't know if they were generating or exporting data. They were unable to quantify savings. They didn't understand or didn't know when the solar panels were last maintained. So the value is unknown of that intervention. And there's crazy stats online about up to 25% energy reduction if your solar panels are dirty. But how do you know what you're actually exporting if you haven't got that data? And then the bottom example is one we're going to be pushing out on our socials over the next couple of weeks, but is a client in Oxfordshire, public sector, Harwell Science and Innovation Campus. One of their buildings, Lumen House, has 200 solar panels. They've had the data, and in the past they were unable to visualise it in a way that was meaningful to them. So they did want it visualised like this. I know I said my war on line graphs, but that's how they wanted it visualised. And their solar is running, they're running on solar during peak hours. So they were, the monitoring showed just under 9 megawatts hours of solar generation in March, which is like the equivalent of 700 laptops through a full 8-hour working day every day from on-site solar. So that visibility they've used to go and unlock more investment for solar. They've used it to identify performance, spot any anomalies in the data, and sort of generate real practical recommendations. So it's similar to the Slido, but sort of ask yourself, do you know how your buildings are actually performing? Do you know how the occupancy of spaces is used? Do you know your water, your energy, your electric, your gas, or how environments are operating? Because temperature and humidity also has a huge impact on our spaces. Can you easily access and trust your data? Are your systems aligned with how your buildings are used? And are decisions based on evidence or assumption? And do you know which buildings should be prioritised? I think someone did mention that was something they are focusing on, say like top 5 energy users. Just going to take a sip, sorry. So what does good look like? To me, that is portfolio-wide visibility, standardised, accessible data. You can evidence your interventions. You've got real data, and then you can prioritise those. And you've got ongoing optimisation, not just one-off projects. So our approach is sort of collect the data, standardise it, act, analyse, and then act. So then what I thought would be useful is to show you some examples of this in practice. So this is a local authority, and they were interested in how much energy was being wasted by their heating outside of occupied hours. So we benchmarked a really simple study for us actually. It was occupancy of the entrances and temperature and humidity throughout the building. So very quickly we were able to tell them which buildings were being underheated, which were being overheated, which may have had issues with the BMS, and actually the set points weren't aligned. And they were trying to do this from sort of a high level estates as opposed to going into each site and asking about the BMS, because there are a lot of politics around how the BMS systems were being used. So we benchmarked that for them. Like I said, we could tell any ones that had issues with scheduling and any that had issues with heating. And then this is the case study that I mentioned before. So very quickly we saved them £10,000 on one building because it was being heated during the day at 22.5 degrees, and at night time it was increased to 24.5 degrees, 365 days a year, every week, weekends, that was just how it was heated. So very quickly you can see sort of the red on the left hand side is where we were monitoring, the black line is where we intervened and said you've got a problem, And then this is where they adjusted their set points on the BMS. So for this project, we weren't doing control, it wasn't automated, but it's a real good example of a very quick wind saving and also a huge CO2 saving as well. Another example, so start with your existing data is always our message, is as a company, I don't come in and just tell you that you need to spend a bunch of money with me on new sensors. It's what data do you already have access to that you can integrate into a dashboard to give you better visibility. So I know that this is not completely similar to a local authority public sector, because this is an industrial client with a huge energy spend. But as an example, they came to us, their previous provider had gone bankrupt, they went with another company and they weren't able to get the data visualised in a way that was meaningful to them. So we said, we can do it. We connected 93 of their existing meters, so I didn't touch any hardware on site. We could very quickly see their energy spend was around 640k a year. We turned that data into something that was meaningful to them. So this client wanted to be able to see their usage this month versus last month, their carbon this month versus last month. They wanted to be able to see a Sankey diagram. They wanted line graphs, and we sort of just built that platform with that client to make sure that it would give them maximum value. So we've just done our first quarter with this client, and after every 3 months with a client, we'll sit down, we'll go through the insights, and we'll make sure that they're not missing something, and if we can pick anything out. So very quickly, we've seen quite a massive case study for us. The client identified £18,000 a month in savings, which could be a 34% of their total energy spend and a 5-week payback. So the client had legacy chillers. They failed within a couple of days of each other. So they brought in a temporary unit, and then what they realised from the data was that that temporary unit was only using 10 to 20% of the previous energy of the previous units. So it was going from a constant running system to an on-demand system. So they're now not going to go, what they were planning to do was fix the old units and go back to that, but they're not doing that now. They're getting rid of those units. They've got the business case to implement the new rental units, and that should save them £216,000 a year, which is an incredible saving. But it was something that was sort of an accident. They noticed it in the data and they've realised, actually, we don't want to go back to the old way of working. Another example, so this client were monitoring 6 pieces of equipment, and very quickly we could see that it wasn't they don't work on a Sunday, but the plant was still running. So we've been able to look at an immediate saving of £4,000 a month, which again, ROI is a couple of months. It's incredible. This is an example of a public sector client. Again, we were matching temperature data with the BMS. So this was a brand new building management system, and I was told by the client, Niamh, I probably only keep these sensors in for a couple of months just to make sure everything's working as we expect, and then you can take them out. They were going for a smart building standard, I think it was BREEAM at the time. This client has been with us for 4+ years now, and they haven't removed the sensors because the data it's that constant optimization. So very quickly, like I said, brand new system, they realised that the building was underheated in some parts, overheated in other parts, and we were able to use that data to bring back the BMS engineers and the HVAC engineers to say this building isn't operating as it should, and we saved them 10 to 20% of their winter heating emissions. And since working with this client, they've carried it on because they saw things like they knew the HVAC had gone down before they actually figured it had gone down because the data told them so. They used it to tell staff that the HVAC's gone down, so you might need to get outside and get some fresh air because the CO2 is going to be high in the building today. They used it to look at the solar that I've shared earlier on in the day. So lots of examples of how you can constantly use that data in a way that is meaningful to you. Again, a slightly different example, but this is a heritage site and it's a venue. They had half-hourly data, but they didn't have an understanding of where energy went in the building. So we were able to KPI that data for them. So how much energy went on show days, non-show days and night times. For a local authority, that could be working days, non-working days, weekends. We were also able to take them from half-hourly data to know exactly where energy went. So how much went on sound, lighting, front of house, production, stage area, dressing rooms. So very quickly they identified some really quick wins. Number one, £20,000 to £50,000 just by matching their usage to their BMS. We also looked at turning fridges off, as an example, holding non-perishable items, Cokes, lemonades, things like that. And we just turned them off when they were dark, when they didn't have a show. And that saved them 70% of their front of house refrigeration. And then within 2 years of this project, we were able to, the client came back to us and said, we've been able to put on an additional 50 performances per year for the same kilowatt hours without increasing capacity. Without increasing their capacity, without increasing their demand. So they were over the moon. And then something that sort of came out of this was some of other wins, which I'll touch on. So these are two production companies, separate companies that have come to use the space. They charge the same flat fee. One used 55 kilowatt hours, one used 650 kilowatt hours. So then that changed the way they were thinking. They were thinking, should individual productions bear their true emissions cost? And this rings true for even myself in this building. We have a number of offices. We rent from a landlord in Rosendale, and my landlord charges me a fixed fee. I pay something like £150 to £180 a month, but I could be using £1,000, £1,500 in energy. And we've been constantly going back to our landlord to tell them about the changes to heat networks, to tell them about the ability to sub-meter and charge. Even though that would negatively impact myself, I still feel like it's something that's good, because one, for my own carbon emissions, I turn the fridge on and off on weekends. I turn down my radiator valves. I don't have to because I'm charged a fixed fee, but it's good and you should do it. So again, it just gets you to think slightly differently. But for them anyway, they were interested in the emissions and whether they could charge touring companies different fees. What also came out of that was then, how did that client prioritise interventions across 70 sites? So we worked with the client to look at LED, solar, hand dryers, voltage optimisation. We were also putting that bracket, so IoT and sub-metering and BMS upgrades. And I promise I haven't just ticked myself. This is from a client's report. This is where they thought the 4 interventions would give them the best return on investment. And they used that from the pre-data that we had and the post-data that we had, and they benchmarked. So we did a whole study on voltage optimisation, hand dryers, solar, LED, some really interesting things that were found. So as an example, this was a different site, again a theatre site, but they were interested in whether they should put lighting controls on the stage area. So we put some CT clamps, some energy clamps around their lighting circuits. They just had half-hourly bills, so they weren't able to do this. And very quickly we showed them that the sub-metering for that lighting was £800 a year for that area. And as you can see on the graph, it's a little bit complicated, but it was from a report. So you've got green is rehearsals, yellow is matinee performances, and evening shows are in purple. And then you can see the lighting circuits in yellow and orange. So you can see to the right hand side, there's sort of a tiny bit of vampire load. So we amortised this over the course of a year, and it would have saved them something like £200. So although this project, it was a tiny project, we would, like I say, a couple of CTs, a gateway, we wrote them a report. The point of it is that they were able to redirect that investment to higher impact savings. It was not cost effective to deploy the lighting circuits because they wouldn't have got the payback. And then another example here, in terms of what we do as an organisation, I've mentioned it in lots of different ways, is we're looking more holistically at a building. So we're looking at how you use the space. So how many people walk through your door, how many people use that meeting room, that desk, that space. One of my colleagues always says a manager will never say my team need less space, but they often do need less space because of the way that our hybrid working and sort of changes to working life have happened. So we look at your occupancy of your building and individual spaces. We're looking at the energy, so total building consumption down to individual meters, down to individual rooms. We're looking at the environment, temperature and humidities. We can do water, leak detection. So many different things can cover in terms of that smart building platform. So as an example, this client was quite a specific challenge statement. It's a 700-acre estate. It's public sector, and we were just doing an initial rollout on 8 of their buildings, and they just wanted to answer that question: is underused space the hidden cost in their estate? And the answer was yes. So we've been able to take them from 36% utilisation to 51%, and we haven't reduced any comfort. So what we've done is monitored occupancy across the whole estate, so desk occupancy data. We can also link that to existing desk booking systems and things like that, but the desk sensors do give us who is there in real time and all the great historical data. So from that, they were able to close a building which was full of asbestos. It was a high maintenance building, and we've just had the stats come through literally within the last couple of days, because I was telling Annie about this case study and I was really excited for the stats. This is going to save them £117,000 per year in avoided maintenance and operating costs. So over 5 years, £500,000 and 11 tonnes of CO2 per year reduction, just by monitoring teams, or having an understanding that teams aren't using it in the same way that they used to, and moving teams together has generated a huge saving. So they're taking that one step further now, and also linking that in with their sub-metering and BMS data, and also linking that occupancy with energy, which again takes you another step forward. Let's take a sip of that. So I think, Annie, I'm hopefully on time. But what we were thinking in terms of breakout rooms, and again, if you've got other ideas in terms of what it is that you'd like to discuss, more than happy. I think we've discussed a couple of breakout rooms, but really to understand what is holding you back in terms of your energy and your building data, and what are some practical next steps. So I was thinking, look for a main barrier. It could be 1 to 3 barriers, but is it a financial issue? Is it a data people, or is it a process issue? Could it be addressed using existing systems or data? And what is a practical step forward? So I was thinking we could come back together and share something like, our main barrier is, this is primarily a data people process issue, and one step forward would be X. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Niamh. Yes, we're going to breakout rooms in a minute. Excellent. Is there anything that anybody wants to raise now before we go into breakout rooms, or any questions for Niamh? Please absolutely feel free to do that.
Or ask me in a breakout room if you're in my breakout room.
Or there will be an opportunity afterwards as well. Okay, no, all good. Okay, let's just go straight to breakout rooms. We've had feedback that these are really helpful to people to learn from each other as to their experiences. And as Niamh said, I've got some. I put them in the chat. The key questions, which is
Thank you.
to come, and then so we'll have. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong. Excuse me. Okay. I'll just get. There we go. I put it in the chat, and we will feedback briefly afterwards to bring those ideas, and then just come back in, because we've got a bit more on hub support going forward, and an update of what's going on. So if we can go straight into the breakout rooms, and there'll be myself, Niamh and Annie in each room to sort of facilitate and feedback. So let's hopefully see you shortly.
Do I need to pick one, Mariam?
Callum can help.
Or will it move?
I think we.
Yeah, sorry. So Niamh, you would be in room 3, Annie in room 1, and Marion in room 2. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Sorry, Callum, how do we pick them? Go to the rooms. Okay, yeah, I'll find it. Yeah, that's great.
Annie, you're on mute.
What room was I in, Callum? Sorry.
Room 1. Annie,
Thank you so much.
Do you know what time I'll pull everyone back?
Yes, it'll probably be in about 15 minutes.
Okay, that's great.
But I'll message you if that's
Lovely.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
of course. Thank you. Bye.
before
things on the market.